Oh, welcome to Untalks again. I'm Matthew, the author of the Undo Meditation and Life Navigation app. And today we're talking on the topic of how thinking is driving people crazy. Thinking doesn't have to drive people crazy, but when we try and use thinking for what it's not useful for, the frustration of the lack of achievement or lack of results from that thinking can end up driving us crazy. And in the world today, we are finding, I'm noticing over and over again, and throughout my whole life I've noticed, that thinking is really a major problem. It's not other people, it's not the world outside of you. It's your thinking about these things. And when your thinking about these things becomes reactionary, it creates an enormous distress for you. And reactionary thinking is a result of not understanding what it is you're thinking about. So you keep reacting to it, not understanding it, not making sense of it. It causes distress. When you don't get what you want, or you don't have what you want, or you don't get what you achieve, or you can't get the results with your health, your mental health, your physical health, with your finances, with your relationships. When things aren't going the way you want them to go, this causes a distress. And that distress drives continuous thinking about what it is that you want and can't get, or want and can't have. And it's not until you're able to satisfy that want or satisfy that desire or what it is you are trying to achieve by achieving that the thinking about that comes to an end. Or not until you resolve that distress that is driving your reactionary thinking are you able to satisfy that distress and bring an end to that reactionary thinking. The main problem I've noticed is that most of you don't really know what thinking is useful for, and on the other hand, you also don't know what it isn't useful for, and that's even more important in some ways. When we try and use thinking for what it cannot be used for, we inevitably fail. When we use thinking for what it's useful for, it works perfectly fine. But when we try and use thinking for what it's not intended, we do not achieve the results that we're looking for through that thinking, and we become distressed. And because we're not achieving the results, rather than realising these results are not going to be achieved through the thought process, we just keep inventing new ways to think about whatever it is we're trying to achieve, whatever it is we're trying to resolve through thinking. And we think more and more and more. And historically, the human being has come up with so many inventions in respect to thinking. There's cultural thinking, there's religious thinking, there's spiritual thinking, there's psychological thinking, there's positive thinking, there's negative thinking, there's fantasizing, there's imagining. There's these various forms and ways of thinking which are quite unique to each other. Yet ultimately, they're all just ways in which we apply thinking in our life to try and get what we want. None of this is mechanical thinking. Whether it's positive thinking or negative thinking or spiritual thinking or cultural thinking or belief systems of any form. All this is thinking in the categories of ideas. And ideas about life aren't always, or not even often, relevant to the facts of life. Mechanical thinking, on the other hand, which is not idea-based, but based in the facts of your own experience, your own sense of yourself as a body, and based in the facts of day-to-day living. When you apply thinking to the mechanics of life, cooking a cake, driving a car, performing your various tasks each day, then that thinking, which is an accumulation of knowledge or information required for performing that task, works really, really well. And it causes you no harm. When you think mechanically about life, you are not emotional, you are not distressed, you are simply applying your knowledge, your understanding to dealing with achieving a particular task or a result. And like when using your understanding to cook a meal for yourself, you're thinking whilst you're cooking that meal, and your thinking is about cooking that meal. So your thinking is actually grounded in something real. It's grounded in the activity of cooking that meal. Consequently, once that meal is cooked, once it's over, there is no more need for that thinking. And the thinking naturally comes to an end once the task that it's mechanically connected to is over. And this correct and appropriate use of thought does not result in distressful or exaggerated overthinking. You know, you've cooked your meal, the task is complete. You don't keep thinking about cooking the meal. It's done. And automatically your thinking comes to an end. You've had an interaction with someone. You've explained something to them and they've understood you. Then in their understanding of you, you don't feel the need to keep explaining yourself. The result brings an end to the effort to get that result, which is explaining yourself. So when thinking is grounded in achievable and real life facts of life, when it's down to earth, then that thinking comes to an end in the achievement of those achievable facts. But when thinking is not mechanical and enters into the realm of belief systems, ideologies, fantasizing, or imagination, then we start to create ideas and desires based on those ideas that are not actually based in reality, that are not actually based in real or achievable realities. And therefore, for example, when we take on an ideology of self-improvement or achieving some spiritual attainment, this ideology is not grounded in the reality of you, but purely in the imagination of that ideology. And so to achieve that which you are not, being the ideal, is also impossible because it's not you. So you can't be what you are not. So the whole time you're trying to achieve that idea, that ideal, that which you are not, you are dissatisfied. And in that dissatisfaction, it only drives you further. The distress of that dissatisfaction has the effect of driving you further to try and achieve that result, which is essentially unachievable. And so ideologies, belief systems, the expectations of religions, the expectations of cultures, that you should be something you are not, or work towards something that is merely an idea. An idea because it's not what you are now. When we are applying thinking to achieving what we imagine, what we make up, what we invent to be a better way to be, then this goes on forever. It goes on forever because there's no way to satisfy that. Once we satisfy that thinking, if we could satisfy that thinking, then at that point, the thinking that drives that interest and that desire to achieve a particular result comes to an end. But if we can't achieve that result, then that frustration and that wanting and that desire keeps going. So much of our thinking, our inventive thinking in life, is this type of thinking which is fantasy thinking, which is not based in reality. It's based in an inventive, imaginative idealisms that the human species has created and indulged in for thousands of years in various different ways. So what is the alternative to this form of thinking, this thinking that does not have an end in sight? The alternative to this form of thinking that doesn't have an end in sight is to go deeper than all this thinking, to go deeper into the sense of yourself exactly as you are, no matter how that actually is. The sense of yourself being the physical feelings that permeate your entire physical structure, the way it feels to be you when you are not getting what you want. Sometimes you just can't get what you want because it's not there to get. And when you can't get what you want, how that leaves you feeling is distress. And out of that distress, you keep trying to get what you want. What you want is invented by other people. You think you want it. Most of the things you think you want, if you can't have them, if you can't get them, if they're beyond your reach, most of these things you'll find are beyond your reach because they actually don't even exist. And they're not as important as you think they are. Being a better person doesn't exist. It's an idea. And whose idea is it? Is it your idea? Did you wake up one day and think, I could be a better person, or did you hear it from somebody else? What you hear from other people about life is other people's thoughts, which is another form of thinking. Another form of thinking which I'm suggesting is false thinking. Thinking which is false to me is thinking that I've learned from other people. Apart from mechanical things that I learn from other people, which is helping me in my day-to-day life, what I learn about myself from other people is guaranteed to be wrong. Absolutely guaranteed to be false. Because nobody can know me as I am. Only I can know me as I am. And I can't even know me as I am by thinking about myself. Because when I think about myself, two things go on. I think about myself according to how other people have treated me, according to my past experiences with other people, what other people have told me, with ideologies which I've been taught to compare myself to, with pressures of society that I'm trying to live up to. So the information that's come to me throughout my life from the outside of me, I try to aspire to, I try to fit in with, I try to be part of, I try to achieve. All this information coming from the outside is not from me. These are other people's thoughts, other people's ideas about who I should be, what I should be, how I should be. And even further than that, other people's opinions or bias or their own particular experience of me, their interpretation of me. It's not about me. What other people think of me does not define me. It defines them. What I think of you is based on my interpretation, my experience. What you think of me is based on your interpretation, your experience. Consequently, we find communication as human beings really, really tricky. Really tricky, because I can express something about me to you, and how do you try and understand that other than refer to your own personal or past experience or a book you've read to somehow associate what I'm saying about me with something you're already familiar with? If you can't find anything within your vocabulary, your mental vocabulary, or your memory that is familiar with what I describe, then you don't understand me. However, this shows that, are you understanding me? Because you can find something in your vocabulary, or am I understanding you because I can find something in my history, in my vocabulary, in my thinking, that I can associate with what you're saying? If I say, today I've been meditating, and you have an understanding of meditation that is from, say, a traditional form of meditation, and I'm not using a traditional form of meditation, then you refer to, oh, when he says he's meditating, he's doing this, I understand that. But it's not the same thing. Then you don't understand it. You understand your idea of it. But to go deeper than that, we do this with each other in relationships. I express myself a certain way, and you interpret that through your thoughts about me. Let's try a really, really simple example right now. As you're listening to me talk, there will be, for most of you, a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts, a lot of interpretations about how he looks, how he sounds, what's he saying, what's he meaning. A lot of thinking going on. And all that thinking that is going on is your thinking, not my thinking, but your thinking about my words or my thinking, my expression. So whilst you're thinking about what I'm saying, you are interpreting what I'm saying to fit with that thinking. And so what I'm actually meaning in what I'm saying is not really being received. It's being changed as it passes through your thought process to eventually resonate somehow with you. But what it's resonating with is what you're allowing it to resonate with, what you're interpreting it into. Rather than thinking about what I'm saying, what about if all you do is use your sense organs? Just listen with your ears. Or if you're looking at me, look at my eyes so that you make contact from your eyes to my eyes, but only looking. Only looking, not thinking about what you're looking at, but just looking, just listening, not thinking about what you know of what I'm saying, but just listening to the tone of my voice, listening to the sound of the words, and listening to them with your senses only, not interpreting them through your thoughts. So what I've introduced there at this point is that there's thinking about life outside of ourselves, which is quite superficial and secondary to sensing life from within ourselves. We're equipped to receive life already when we're born. We're equipped to understand life in a different way. The body, through sensing, understands in a very different way to how thinking understands. In fact, thinking doesn't understand. That's not what it's for. Thinking merely interprets and either rejects or accepts based on preferences and beliefs learned from outside of ourselves. And what is it that thinking receives is what the body already senses and understands, what you as a living organism, through your senses and through the sensory capacity of every cell in your body, know in the instant of receiving something. Sensing precedes thinking. And when we're using our sensing, when we're listening, when we're looking, when we're feeling the sense of someone else in our presence, we get a sense of something, we know it. Then we talk about it. Another example, we think about it and talk about it. A more clear example is we sense when we're hungry. We sense when we're cold. We sense when we're warm. We sense another person's presence. We don't know these things through thinking. We know these things only after. We know these things as a thought process only after the primary understanding of these things by sensing these throughout the body of ourselves. So we know we are hot because we feel it. We know we are hungry because we feel it. And all of this feeling precedes the next stage of thinking. So life is received and understood by all animals, including ourselves, primarily through the sensation of our own existence, through the sensation of the body of what we are through our sense organs. And thinking or intellect does not understand in itself. It merely either receives what we already understand and accepts it, what we already understand at a sensory level and accepts it and interprets that, or rejects it. When thinking first arises from you, when you feel hungry, the thought that occurs from that is, I feel hungry. These are your thoughts and these are true about you. But when thinking originates outside of you, these are other people's thoughts. And so many of our thoughts are other people's thoughts. When listening to other people's thoughts and trying to live up to and live our lives according to other people's thoughts, culture, society, parents, and so on, this is when we struggle. And this is when we lose our own sense of ourself. And these thoughts are false thoughts. They are false to us. Whereas the real thoughts, the true thoughts, are the thoughts that find their origin in the sensation of what it is to be you. Thanks very much. I'll see you on the next talk. Bye for now.